Young man, how are you? Good to see you.
sound?
No, so slow.
Oh, okay. Don't worry. I think it's just his laptop not running that sound.
That's fine.
Okay, good.
A little quiet, but
Yeah, that's whatever. I'll adjust that. I'll adjust that as needed. So for whatever reason, I wasn't.
Good morning, everybody. Could you please all move to a seat if you feel like sitting, or could you stand still if you feel like standing?
Come on up. Come on. Come on up. Welcome to PTC 16. The board of the PTC welcomes you, and generally speaking, in Hawaii we say aloha. Thank you. Thank you for turning up at 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning. I hope you didn't have too much fun last night, but there were some pretty interesting things occurring around the traps. We've got to move fairly quickly from this end because we have a lot of speakers and a lot of information to pass on. But welcome to the Submarine Cable Workshop. This session is a very popular session, and this year we have also organised to flow the session straight into the telegeography session. And to do that we're going to have, and you'll see on your tables, plates and things ready, a submarine cable luncheon as well. So I look forward to any feedback people will have about that, because it's the first time we've done something like this. This morning, we have, as you probably realise from the program, two sessions. Part one, that I'll be have all my friends, or not all of them, just most of them, on the table here with us, and we'll be giving you a bit of a state of the nation in regards to submarine cables. Now, in that regard, we're not going to attempt to actually replace the great work that many organisations do around the world. We want to give you an overview. So if there's a cable that we mention, or if there's a cable that we forget to mention, don't worry about it. We're not here to actually give you every submarine cable plan, thought or idea in the world. We're here to give you a state of play, to give you an idea of where the cable industry is actually at as at this time in 2016. So I really thank you all for attending. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful PTC, and I hope this session gives you all a bit of a boost to get into the sessions and the networking and the camaraderie that we all do share in the industry. So without further ado, what I'm going to do is I'm going to work out how to work this, which I've actually done a couple of times now. But I'm going to ask Wayne Nielsen to come up, if that's okay, please.
Good morning. First off, thanks to PTC and Paul for organizing this session. Can everybody hear me? Okay. This is a nice new room for us, so thanks, guys. This is whoever organized this. Nice job. I'm going to talk a little bit about the transatlantic world, and I think we were supposed to talk a little bit about where we come from, so I'll do that first. I come from Virginia. Okay. There we go. So basically, looking at the transatlantic, at the moment we have 11 current systems. There are 3 big systems that are being planned. We have our first new cables in about 12 years, and we had a stoppage in the 12-year growth of transatlantic systems because of bandwidth glut. We had a little bit of a financial crisis in the early 2000s that you folks might remember. But at the same time, we also have a new push for low latency. Before 2015, the average systems were on the order of about 13,000 kilometers in total length. They had similar routing between the U.S. and Europe. And the system's rollout from 1999 through 2003 was actually pretty fast. We had 2 systems in 99, 2 in 2000. We had 4 systems in 2001, and then another system in 2003. But as everybody knows, we had 0 systems from 2004 to late 2015. But during that time, there was an awful lot of upgrades that went on. I believe it's still true that the Atlantic is still the world's highest capacity cable route. And between 2010 and 2014, capacity increased about 240% across the Atlantic. 100% of those existing systems upgraded to 40G technology, and of those, 75% of existing systems upgraded to 100G technology. So lots of upgrade activity in the transatlantic world. 2015-16, we have 2 new systems. First time in a lot of years. Hibernia Express went in late 15 in the November timeframe or so, and they booked themselves as the fastest latency on the New York to London route. And last week, AE Connect announced that they had finished their system, and they booked themselves as the most secure transatlantic cable system in existence. Both of these systems average about 5,000 kilometers, and both systems use 100G technology. One of the benefits of seeing articles early with SubTel is I get to steal from people. And there was an interesting article that came across that I saw talking about transatlantic a little bit, and it was published yesterday. But the author analyzed data coming out of Kingfisher looking at the European region. And he reveals that there are a number of cable crossings between the transatlantic systems on the Eurasian plate. And if you look at this is a table that he put out. In fact, what he's suggesting is there are indeed a lot of cable crossings on the plate. There is no data for AE Connect, to be fair, because that data hadn't been put in the system yet. But what he suggested was that multiple overlaps in the region could decrease network resilience. So let's talk about planned systems, transatlantic. There are really 2 mid-Atlantic systems that are being talked about, and there's 1 South Atlantic to Europe system. So looking at potential transatlantic systems, when we add the systems in, the 3, we see a potential jump in the 2017 and beyond period. I think of the 3 systems, it's fair that 1 or 2 are probable or possible. But what's also interesting is that by bringing these systems in, we seem to be looking at a new southern connectivity. So let's talk about the potential mid-Atlantic systems. There are really 2 that are being talked right now. One is AEC number 2, and the second is Fiber Atlantic. Both are addressing a desire to connect data centers in Ashburn, Virginia. They're trying to get there faster than a northern route. Both are creating and looking to create geographic diversity from New York, New Jersey area. Looking at the South Atlantic Europe system, there's Eulolink that's being worked on. And it's really, well, currently Brazil is connected to the internet through the U.S. So the goal of Eulolink is to reduce their dependence on U.S. hubs. They also want to host global data centers for their heavy users. And, quote, they want to give us greater security and more agile communications with Europe. They want to go around the U.S. So is there a rosy outlook? Well, past transatlantic systems utilize pretty much similar paths, but there seems to be a diversity play which could compel new southern cables. And that could create enhanced transatlantic resilience between the U.S. and Europe. Concerns? A couple. Going to the beach in North Carolina over New Year's, I was buying gas at $1.68 a gallon. I saw something on TV yesterday. Somebody was saying they're buying gas in the U.S. at 99 cents a gallon. Iran is now free to sell its oil abroad. If there are any concerns, will these new cables potentially drive down price to unsustainable areas, plateaus? But let's end on a positive note. An interesting article also in this issue of SubTel from Derek Cassidy, and I'll just quote him. He says, development of transatlantic cables will allow for internet capacity-hungry industries and technological knowledge-sharing societies to grow and meet the demand by being able to offer diverse paths to the markets, enabling them to reduce the bottlenecks and grow market share, which is, I think, true. And that's it.
It's going to be a little bit like speed dating, okay? We're going to go right around the whole world, and then we're going to get operational, we're going to get all sorts of other things. So I'm not going to do too much introductions. If you'd like to read the bios of these wonderful people that have offered their time and energy to do this, please, it's in the documentation that you've got. I'd like to welcome up to the microphone now, please, Byron Clatterback from CCOM.
Yeah, Paul asked me to talk about a small part of the world, Africa, MENA, and Southeast Asia. Actually, I think he said India at the time. And originally I thought, that's a pretty big area to cover, and with everything that's happening. But then I thought about it, and I thought, okay, there's some big shoulders. There's some common themes, and I thought I'd just kind of touch on the common themes without going into the details of all the projects that are going on. I should also say, by way of introduction, that I'm the CEO of CCOM. We're a privately owned cable operator in Africa, east coast of Africa. So my perspective might be a little different in that we actually try to make money out of providing services over the systems that we build. So maybe that just taints the view of how I look at what's happening in the marketplace. So on that note, I won't way too many words on this slide, but I think that the common theme between the Middle East, if you start from Southeast Asia, India, the Middle East, even Africa, was that all the traffic flows pretty much traditionally went to Europe to get access to content. So all of the builds and most of the designs of those systems were driven really for carriers and their customers to get content that was stored in the greater North American, European pod, if you will. And obviously, within those markets, as those cables were built and traffic flowed in those directions, obviously some markets were very liberal and open. A lot of competitors, a lot of landing parties could get access to their capacity, and a lot of markets were completely closed. So the cables would land, and you would see a very different dynamic between whether that market was open and there was open access, or whether that market was closed. Predominantly, these were consortium cables, just by the nature of those markets being largely closed. We're quite unique in Africa, being a private cable system, and certainly have our challenges in markets where you don't have that kind of liberalization and you don't have access of a lot of customers to your cable. So we're completely open, but there's no one to come and get the capacity. So you see a very different dynamic between what the market's doing in Kenya, for example, and Tanzania right next door. Markets are relatively similar in size, population, but Tanzania took a much more regulated approach, and you haven't seen the kind of growth. So what we've seen is that if you combine that regulatory liberalization with the private and consortium mix, you see a pretty healthy market. Having said that, I'll talk a little bit about the potential to overbuild in certain routes. Now, this is CMV5. Looks pretty similar to CMV4, although it doesn't go quite as far. And this is going to go RFS the end of this year, okay? Now, we've seen this cable configuration for many years, way back in the day. And it's obviously a popular one because it kind of picks up traffic in Southeast Asia, picks up traffic in India, picks up traffic through the Middle East, and then heads into Europe. And I think, you know, we're still seeing that that is an attractive route, and it also kind of connects the globe, if you will, from capacity that can go from kind of East Asia onto the west coast of the United States in that direction. And you'll look at the names, the owners there. Now, the interesting thing is, I actually have changed slides, okay? This is another cable, AE1. It's also going RFS the end of this year, at least that's the story. And the routing looks pretty similar. Now, obviously, different owners and different landing parties. And I think that really is the crux of kind of what I'm saying and talking about, is that obviously you'd question, is there the need for the two cables to be built? Is there that demand? Maybe, you could see. You're not offering much diversity because the routing is almost identical. And we all know the issues as you go up through the Red Sea and across Egypt. But obviously you have different owners and therefore different access. So I think that really, in some ways, drives the construction, particularly in the region I'm talking about, of cables, because one party knows they're never going to get access to that capacity on the other cable if it's landed by party X and you happen to be party Y. So you build two. And you might build another, like this one. Which again, similar, the BBG cable. It was supposed to go RFS in December. I don't know if anyone can give me an update on that. I don't know if that happened. But again, built, okay, it's a little shorter than the others I just showed you, but it's similar in design in some ways. But again, the issue being if you don't have access to those other two, you have this cable, and you can get access to this one. So I think we're going to see a huge amount of supply of capacity on the route that goes Southeast Asia, India, into Europe, but it's going to be controlled by different players. And some look at this as a build versus buy situation, and therefore, you know, makes sense to them, maybe. It does seem to be a bit redundant. Now, I'll talk a little bit now about Africa, because again, the flow going from Africa, and I'll talk East Coast first, up into Europe. And you've got quite a few cables being talked about. So as CMV5 and as AE1, I think people are looking to say, okay, there's more connection options to get up to Europe. So maybe we build some spur cables that will connect into those bigger projects. So you've got G2A, DARE, which is, again, Djibouti driven. I don't know where that's going to go, but again, you know, I think they know they're landing those other two cables in Djibouti, so why not build a spur that would get East Africa traffic onto those and drive up interconnect business. O2C is a project that CECOM's actually working on. That's up the East Coast from Mombasa and goes up into the Red Sea, really for redundancy purposes on the East Coast. Liquid Sea was just announced. Not sure how real that one is, but it's really talking about the similar design, which is to build from the East Coast, actually even South Africa, up into the Middle East and connect into all those new cables. And then we have the AWE cable, with the idea being it will build from Western Australia across the Indian Ocean and land in Djibouti as well, so kind of to connect into from that angle. So a lot of projects being talked about. Obviously, on the east coast of Africa, you have three kind of main cables. You have CECOM, which is a private cable. You have EASY, and you have Teams, which goes up into Fujairah. So CECOM, we took the position that actually we're going to build our cable all the way up into Europe because we couldn't, we didn't want to be held I don't want to say hostage. We didn't want to be held accountable for the cross-connect charges that at the time were high, but now relative to the price of capacity are very high. So we don't have that challenge, knock on wood. West Africa, we're seeing a couple of things happen there. The WAX cable obviously upgraded, and now the ACE extension building down into South Africa has been announced. So really when you look at West Coast, you'll now have 3 cables. If you look at SAT3, WAX, and if ACE does come down, which I think the plan is for the end of the year, to bring that down into South Africa. And then you've got a few other little regional cables coming along as well. Now this is a new route, obviously going from Africa to South America. There's been a lot of cables talked about. I'm not sure if these are going to happen. They're all in different stages of development. You know, it's an interesting design theory that there's demand going obviously from West Africa into South America. You can lower latency to get to the United States, et cetera, et cetera. But again, I guess the question you'd always ask would be, is there value in that, and are people willing to pay that value? Because today you can go from all those West African countries up to Europe on one of the cables I mentioned, and then across Europe to the United States that way. So you might be cutting off some latency, but it'd be a challenge to really see, I think, the demand that might justify these projects. So, am I bad on time?
You're going really well.
Okay, thanks. So yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of announcements. Obviously, I think this is true all over the world. Some of them will materialize, some of them will not. And not all of them make sense economically, I guess is really where I'm coming from. We're seeing a lot of activity in markets here where the markets are fairly closed, they're fairly small, yet you see big major projects going in the water. And you have to kind of question that sometimes, what that could potentially do to the people who have existing assets and are trying to leverage those. So I think we'll see what happens. And I think on top of that, and this has been talked about, is that another trend is that the regions are becoming more regional in the sense that as the over-the-top players, content starts to aggregate within the regions and within countries, whether that's YouTube or Facebook content. And really what we're seeing, even on, like, if you look at our IP network in Africa, we're seeing more and more content being accessed on the continent of Africa. So we used to take everything up to Europe. Now I'd say less than half of that is going up to Europe because the content is mirrored or cached in Africa. And you're seeing announcements from Netflix and others that they're coming now in other parts of the world to put their servers and their content there. So I think that's going to change a bit as well in the dynamics, which also has an impact on the subsea industry. So on that note, I will hand over. Thank you very much.
All right, so we're going anti-clockwise, okay? We're not going clockwise. Masuda-san, come on down.
So good morning, everybody. My name is Masuda. I come from NEC Corporation. I'm the only supplier on this panel, I think. And I think I will be talking about Asia-Pacific markets today. The Asia-Pacific market is very broad, but I have categorized it into 3 areas. Each have their own characteristics, so it will be different, I think. The Trans-Pacific market, and there's the intra-Asia, and there's the Pacific Islands, I think. And I'd like to talk, as a supplier, I would like to talk about permitting, just 1 page. So, talking about the transatlantic, the market overview is not as the Atlantic, but the Pacific also. Most of the cables are like 15 years old, except for the new ones, really new ones. And the 10G systems that are in place are really maturing. The theoretical limit of upgradability, there's limitations to that as well. And in the very near future, we will be needing new cables based on 100G technologies between Japan and US, and of course China and US. Also, there is a new demand between the Southeast Asia directly to the United States, which is only served by AAG today. Of course, there are several projects in the planning that go from Southeast Asia directly to the United States, and we will be seeing a lot of these cables also. Another one is Australia, New Zealand to the United States, which is only served by Southern Cross today. And we will be looking at new cables in this area as well. Another point here is that Guam, the island of Guam is becoming strategically important, and a lot of cables are trying to land in Guam, and Guam will be, I hope, or I think, will be the new cable hub in the Pacific. I've given you a list on the bottom side of the slide with a list of projects. These are not an exhaustive list. These are just samples, so I won't go through them one by one. If you have a chance to look at these slides afterwards, you might be able to see those. And anyway, so let's go to the next one. The intra-Asia one. This has a different characteristic. Most of the intra-Asia cables today are to serve the unserved markets, like the economies of Thailand or Vietnam. They have cables, but they are not really new cables. Myanmar and Cambodia, they lack in cable as well. So these underserved markets need connectivity. Also, there's the need for domestic cables, like the countries of Malaysia or Indonesia, which is spread across a very huge geographical landscape. And there is also a new type of cable which just hooks up to existing cable networks. These would be like Cambodia or Myanmar. These would try to hook up to the main trunks, adding branches. And this sort of type of cable is newly seen in this area as well. Lastly, the Pacific Islands. The Pacific Islands usually are now served by satellite or maybe one single cable. The lower capacity needs, it's not really a high capacity need, but they do need connectivity to the broadband. Also, the way to do this is that they really can't afford to build new cables from point to point, so they tend to hook up to existing cables. And even the islands that do have one cable need diversity, so they're looking at, they're planning at second cables. And also, the key issue here is always financing. Traditionally, it has been financed by the World Bank or the Asia Development Bank, or maybe ECAs of independent countries, but we do need to find other sources of finance in order to build these projects. Some of the projects here I've listed: Solomon Islands, Palau, Micronesia. Of course, Tonga and Vanuatu already have their own single cable, but they need a diversity. And we're looking at Samoa and Papua New Guinea. And of course, we can't forget about Saipan. Last year, a cable cut was experienced in Saipan, and everything went down in Saipan. They couldn't get money out. They couldn't pay by credit card, no Netflix, anything. So we do need new cables, and we do need diversity, I think. Lastly, as a supplier, I want to touch upon permitting. Permitting today is becoming a critical path on most cables. Each country has its own unique procedures. Japan has their procedures, China, Indonesia. Every country has their own different procedure, and we have to know what those procedures are. And it is always, always time-consuming. Asia-Pacific cables will tend to cross various jurisdictions, either by landing or by transit. Even if it's a domestic Malaysian cable, it will go through Indonesian waters. So we have to think about getting Indonesian permits without an Indonesian landing party. So these are the challenges that the suppliers will face, and in turn, the purchasers will face as well. So as a supplier, I would like to suggest, first of all, the purchasers, if possible, should start the permitting process as early as possible, even before signing the contract with any supplier. I understand that most of the permits can be only done after the contract has come into force, but the preparation work can be done. So I would strongly suggest each purchaser to start their preparation. And also, everybody has to know that sovereignty and geopolitics can always prevent a cable from happening. So we do have to do the groundwork beforehand. And if we can do that, I think that we can all implement a cable project smoothly. Lastly, as a member of SubOptic EC, I would like to remind you that in April, there will be SubOptic 2016. I hope everybody here will come and register and participate in SubOptic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Masuda. Is everybody awake? Everybody's enjoying what they're hearing, are they? Because we have more to come. John.
Aloha, good morning, everybody. Come on, aloha. Everybody's got to wake up. All right. So I was asked to talk about, well, first of all, introduction. Like Wayne, a Virginian, up from Northern Virginia. I like to get in the traffic around Washington, D.C. and hang out a lot up there. I'm the COO for Ocean Networks, building the South American Pacific Link system up there. So we were asked to talk about Latin America and the Caribbean region over there. In my analysis, I wanted to take a look at both economics, what's driving traffic in the region, et cetera, what is driving investment, and specifically what's driving investment in telecom. An awful lot of foreign investment and foreign direct investment, FDI, in telecom across the region right now. Just like what Africa is seeing, a large boom in telecoms infrastructure build out right now, wireless, wired, et cetera, over there. The same thing is occurring in Latin America and across the Caribbean. Caribbean predominantly is being boosted by the improved economics with regards to tourism. Tourists today want to have all of our devices that we all have, at least 2 or 3 or 4 of those hanging on our belts so that we carry along with us. So they want to be highly connected. We're seeing the 4G connectivities move up. We went through a period of improvements in the connectivity over the last decade. Not a lot of building, but mostly improvements in the Latin America area is probably the largest area of improvements into the 40G region compared to the rest of the world, and now moving into the 100G system. New systems, there's quite a few of them we're going to talk about this morning over there. All are 100G, SDN capable and upgradable to 400G. So you see that momentum and that movement moving on there. If all the planned systems over the next 2 years achieve RFS, along with the 2 most recent systems over there, we've got an awful lot of capacity coming into Latin America and the Caribbean region over there. So you see over on the left, I pulled this out of a little bit of research I did with regards to where is this investment all coming from over there, what are the drivers. So we know about, and we've talked about the OTT players, the content providers, et cetera. There's a lot of that. Data centers are moving in. We like data centers, subsea systems like data centers, and content providers, and they like us as well. The processing, wireless carriers, wired systems terrestrially, they all need to connect to us as well. So what you see greater than 100% improvements over there, and the forecast is we're going to continue to see that over the next few years as they build out the infrastructure across Latin America and the Caribbean as well. Couple highlights on these trends. Mobile device penetration. You know, we talk about getting to the eyeballs, right, in this community over here. There's a lot more eyeballs to reach to right now, and they're all just like any other continent, predominantly along the seashore over there where we land. So the improvements in connectivity and the mobile device penetration in Latin America and the Caribbean is going to see a continuing significant upward trend and is expected to achieve 65% penetration by 2018. That's a lot more providers, a lot more subscribers on the system, a lot more bandwidth requirements. Data center growth in the key market areas over there. As you look around Latin America, you're starting to see populations of even the smaller data center growth over there in support of these activities, and the OTT expansion is occurring across the region. Consumer demand is driving these network improvements. Like us, they want improved, they want faster, they want more data, they want it now. So there is a significant amount of investment and build out to achieve that over there. 4G networks, high performance, with the demand for capacity and efficiency across this region. a lot of similarities with what we're seeing in Africa over here. Wired and wireless, we talked about that. That market is exceeding 130% per annum these days. But so that all looks really nice and rosy for this region over there, but the economies across the board are actually on the downturn right now. Other factors, when you look at the various impacts to their gross domestic product across the region over there are on a downturn. So we've got this upturn in telecom over here because of the need for more access, but you're seeing an overall economic downturn. So what's the good news here? The vast majority of investment, both domestic within this region and the foreign domestic investment is being driven into the telecom sector across the board. What's driving this growth over here? The atypical areas, banking, finance, the communication sector, commerce and e-commerce specifically. This is one of the, especially in the Caribbean region, entrepreneurship is at a rate of about 60%. There's very few jobs unless you want to work in the service industry around there. So the youth that are coming up, their choice is either to start something on their own, or they're going to leave and they're going to go to Europe. They're going to come to the U.S. They're going to go to a continent somewhere out there. Entertainment industry, as you saw in the earlier chart, is booming as well. Home computing, gaming, government is getting more involved in communications and communications improvements, and they are aligning part of their GDP against telecom infrastructure growth because they too need to see these same improvements. Public health care, telemedicine, et cetera, over there to reach further into the vast regions around here and specifically out into the Caribbean nations to improve our health care. Scientific research, software and technology developments as well. A lot of work, a lot of opportunity over there, but the economies are struggling in this region. A couple of newest systems that have gone live just in the last few years. So I look back just a couple of years. I'm going to look forward just a couple of years over there. So we had AMX1 that went RFS in 2014. Large system, just under 18,000 kilometers over there with 50 terabits of capacity. I want you to start adding up all the capacity that you're going to see in the next few slides. PCCS just went live here third quarter of 15 over there. 6,000 kilometers and 80 terabits per second. Coming up Ecuador through Panama and then across the region up into there. 6 major systems planned in the Latin America and Caribbean area, just around the horn over here. We've got Monet coming online in fourth quarter this year, 10,600 kilometer system, 2 fiber pairs, 20 terabits. Eula Link was mentioned earlier by Byron. We've got 5,900 kilometer system and 30 terabits. Cebras coming in, 10,500 kilometers, 72 terabits per second. SAPL, my favorite, South American Pacific Link, coming in 17,600 kilometers, 30 terabits, 3 fiber pair system. SAX mentioned earlier as well, 40 terabits. SAEX, 40 terabits over there. So improvement to global connectivity driving these changes. So what's happening over here? Latin America and Caribbean region have seen a lot of steady growth since, if you go look all the way back to the early 90s, and you're starting to see a lot of growth in the telecom, almost doubling the service of the systems over the last 10 years in here. New routes in the Pacific and Atlantic, creating diversity and resiliency right now, and you've heard it mentioned by others earlier this morning on this discussion point over here. All the other routes before, we had to go to the west coast of the U.S. If you're coming out of Asia or Oceania, Australia, New Zealand region down there, you had to come across the U.S., get over to New York or Miami, and then you would kind of circle back down into the Americas and the Caribbean region down here. Now, there are direct routes, so lower latency, high volume, high capacity systems being built that can serve the Asia region, can serve Australia, New Zealand, and get them direct into the Latin American and Caribbean market over there without having to go across the U.S., do an IP transit, get to New York, get to Miami, and then find your way down into the region. Same thing over there on the East Coast. We see direct links out of going into Europe and into Africa over here. We've mentioned some of these earlier over here. So you're seeing so improved latency, more direct routes, and you can get continent to continent with a lot less traveling around throughout the region up here. So what is driving this, and why are these cables being built? Again, I mentioned the global data centers. There's a lot of expansion in these. Small ones feeding the local traffic over there, and then you're seeing the larger global data center providers also hitting this region. And what are we getting out of there? What do we like? We like pop-to-pop solutions. So now you can provide pop-to-pop solutions from Asia into Latin America and or the Caribbean. You can provide pop-to-pop solutions between Europe and Latin America and the Caribbean. You can do that also into Africa. So a couple final thoughts. As I mentioned over here, cloud storage and data backup by the consumers is driving a lot of this significant increase and is driving new consumers into this particular market over here, which is the reason for the significant amount of investment in telecom in this region. In turn, this is driving the need for the subsea development that you saw here today. The investment in the infrastructure continues at a pace of greater than 80% per year due to this investment. The wireless development trend specifically is increasing development, and that's been increasing in this region over 120% per year. Again, they need significant connectivity to fulfill the needs of that infrastructure. So I think the focus in this particular region over the next in the future will be based on development and deployment of new systems in this region over here. Thank you.
Okay, so we've gone around the world in 50 minutes. Hope you... that's a pretty encouraging story, isn't it? It's really an amazing period of time, an amazing year, and an amazing year in front of us. And whilst I'm talking about amazing, I think Kent's waiting. Not that that's amazing, it's just that... Thank you, Kent. Over to you.
Thanks, Paul. Good morning, everyone. I'm pleased to see that even with a bigger room, we have managed to pack it out, and appreciate everybody being here early on a Sunday morning. I'm Kent Bressie. I am the head of international practice at Harris Wiltshire and Grannis, based in Washington, D.C., although I spend a lot of time traveling in this part of the world. And this morning I'm going to talk a little bit about regulatory developments. A lot of these are U.S.-centric, not just because that's where I'm based and licensed to practice, but also, as Masuda-san indicated, with a lot of interest in hubbing cables through Guam or with transoceanic systems landing in the United States, where Canadian landings have not yet displaced U.S. landings. There's a need to grapple with U.S. regulatory requirements. And also the U.S. is definitely a leader in regulation in some areas, not always in a positive way. So with that, we're going to skip through 7 particular areas, and some of this will touch a little bit on cable protection, but most of that I will leave to Dean Vaverka to speak to. The first issue that I wanted to talk about was reaction to media reports that Russian submarines had been conducting reconnaissance near installed submarine cable systems. A lot of the media coverage about this seemed like paranoia, but I think it was clear that U.S. government agencies had purposely leaked this information to get media coverage. And it provoked an interesting reaction. I think it helped to jumpstart longstanding interest in creating a submarine cable protection group within the White House National Security Agency. This was really the thing that tipped that initiative over into implementation. There's concern of members of Congress writing letters to different federal agencies about this. All of this has created a lot of activity that I think is potentially very misdirected. With a lot of this kind of reconnaissance activity, which has gone on for decades, There's not a lot that governments or industry can necessarily do other than build resilient networks. But it also takes the focus away from activities or risks that can effectively be mitigated by governments. And those are not as newsworthy, or they don't sound like a spy novel, but they are things like commercial fishing and anchoring. Governments can do a lot about that. Sadly, I think we're seeing a lot of the focus on things like Russian submarines, just like the mythic stories about shark bite, which are essentially unfounded. So all of this means, I think, that we're going to see in the U.S. More stringent security reviews by the team telecom agencies, and we're also going to see even more pressure to adopt FCC proposals for outage reporting, so that there's data to assess what the potential sources of the outage were and to determine if it was malicious activity. So with Team Telecom, the focus areas continue to evolve in reacting to global events and geopolitics. Team Telecom, of course, is the nickname for the security agencies that review new infrastructure applications in the U.S. Where there's significant foreign ownership or the infrastructure connects to a country other than the U.S. And also mergers and acquisitions activity. So it's the Departments of Defense, Homeland Security, and Justice. Increasingly, Team Telecom is very much focused on the location of network operation centers. That is a consistent set of questions in security reviews. There's also a lot of concern about outsourcing and offshoring, the use of encryption and security appliances, third-party OSS systems, and the like. So whether you're a customer, system owner, system supplier, these are all things to be concerned about in the project planning stage or in negotiating a merger or an acquisition. It's not just at the front end with the system, though, or with the deal, that Team Telecom is increasingly active. Team Telecom is more focused than ever on compliance. The agencies have hired a lot of new personnel, and they are starting to conduct site inspections, which has certainly spooked some system owners. I don't think that it needs spook them. They have existing compliance obligations, and dealing directly with the agencies is not such a bad thing. But it certainly raises compliance costs. And also, given the interest of the agencies in conducting site inspections outside the United States, it raises concerns about sovereignty and extraterritoriality. And this is going to be interesting to see how this plays out this year, with U.S. government agencies trying to show up in other countries to conduct review and inspection activities. So the other focus area is with the Communications Assistance for Law Enforcement Act. This is the U.S. Digital Wiretap Law. A lot of operators that have common carrier systems and their carrier customers have not complied with this law. And the Justice Department in particular is really starting to crack down on compliance matters, which can come up in a review for a new system or a transaction. So not sure how well you can read some of the text here. Some of it is a little small, but here we have some information about recent transaction approval times and licensing times for new systems. You'll see the date on which the FCC application was filed, the date of conclusion of mitigation arrangements with the Team Telecom agencies, either a network security agreement or a letter of assurance, the date of FCC consent, and the total approval time. The ones in brackets are transactions that are pending right now. Obviously, Liberty Global and Cable and Wireless / Columbus at the top, but there are also a number of other pending transactions. So the approval times for transactions are generally shorter than for new systems. In some cases because there are already mitigation arrangements in place. And I'm not going to read through all of this. If you're interested in getting a copy of these slides afterwards, just pass me a business card. I'd be happy to send them to you. For new licensing times, We also have quite a bit of activity after in certain regions not seeing new systems for some time. The CBROS 1 application was filed with the FCC on Friday. We also have NCP, FASTER, CUS, and MONET pending before both the FCC and the Team Telecom agencies. That's a lot of activity, particularly with the consortium systems. That's a lot of review for the security agencies in particular, which is probably going to slow down overall processing times, even with their new hiring. So, again, most of these, other than CBROS, involve multiple owners, which are generally more involved reviews. And you'll see some of the more historical systems here and their processing times. Quite a bit of variation. You'll see with the Virgin Islands NGN, for example, the processing time was a total of 67 days because there was no Team Telecom review. It's not listed on here, but AT&T's Goki system as well took a total of 14 days. It helps to have military customers. So the next subject that I want to provide a brief update about is the FCC's proposal for outage reporting, which has generated a lot of angst in industry, in particular because a lot of the proposals don't seem workable from the perspective of the North American Submarine Cable Association and its members and other industry members. And I think it's important to keep in mind that it's not discounting the consequences of outages and how that can impact particularly small island communities. And that's why there's certainly been a lot of focus on what happened with the Northern Marianas. But a single data point does not a regulatory regime make. And I think that's the concern that NASCA and others have certainly expressed. So we're going to see quite a bit of back and forth about this as the FCC drives toward adoption of some kind of outage reporting regime. This, I think, would be the most involved and burdensome regime that I'm aware of in the world. Certainly Singapore has a fairly involved outage reporting regime with stringent requirements. Hong Kong's, I think, is a little more flexible. But it's our hope that the FCC will take into account some of the concerns that industry has expressed about looking at actual outages across all the systems that serve the U.S., looking at redundancies that do exist as compared with the Marianas case where there was no redundancy, and linking that reporting activity to make sure that it serves cable protection. The data that is gathered should help regulators actually protect cables more effectively, not simply produce good reports. There's a lot of concern about the mechanics of this with consortium systems, particularly with multiple and foreign owners with a lot of staff who are not necessarily English speakers. And so there's a lot of burden to be concerned about here. So I think you're going to be hearing more about this. The FCC, if it had its way, would adopt this in the summer of 2016. I think industry is very keen to have an appropriate transition period for anything that is adopted. Which takes me to the next subject, generally a happy one when we talk about regulatory matters, and that is that the FCC's fees, which used to cause great consternation when they were capacity-based, are now system-based. There's a flat fee each year paid by an operational system, and those decreased by a whopping 30% this past year. Again, NASCA leading the charge with trying to persuade the FCC that its methodology needs further adjustment. The unfortunate news here is that I think with all of the other activity that the FCC is engaged in with submarine cable protection and outage reporting, that is increasing FCC staffing levels relating to submarine cables. So I think we're unlikely to see significant drops in fees in the future. Much as we've been pleased to see them drop a lot, I think methodologically they're still too high for a bunch of complicated reasons I won't explain here. But I think that industry should adjust its expectations about whether or not those fee levels are going to continue to drop. That said, with all of the new systems that are being developed, the more systems there are, the bigger the denominator for dividing up the recovery amount for fees. So we could still see incremental drops with a lot of new systems coming online, so long as they outpace retirements. Just a brief note in terms of FCC paperwork for those of you who operate existing systems or are customers of existing systems. You know that the FCC implemented capacity reporting requirements both for system owners and system customers this year, caused quite a bit of confusion as to who had to file what, and the instructions are still a work in progress. So much of this was adopted because industry was largely silent during the rulemaking process, I think largely because they were fatigued from fighting the FCC over fees. But it is a reminder that if you want to avoid regulatory burdens, you can't just expect that somebody else is going to raise the issue. You do have to weigh in with the regulator. Lastly, I'm going to talk a little bit about CSRIC activities, the rather unlovely acronym for the FCC's Advisory Committee, the Communications Security, Reliability, and Interoperability Council. The FCC has had some form of advisory committee like this for many, many years, but in 2013 first adopted a proposal to create a submarine cable working group focused on submarine cable protection. And I chair that working group, again, this time with my co-chair, Catherine Crease, from the U.S. Navy. We had delivered quite a long report last year, which was well received and unanimously adopted. Wasn't anonymous by the FCC, by the full CSRIC, looking at submarine cable risks and separation distances from other marine infrastructure and activities. This time around, we are focused on intergovernmental and interjurisdictional coordination, trying to improve what federal, state, and government agencies do that affects submarine cables, whether it's with permitting submarine cables themselves or permitting other activities that could pose threats, whether it's renewable energy infrastructure or sand and gravel dredging and beach replenishment after a hurricane. There are some rather harrowing examples of how these uncoordinated activities have nearly been conducted directly over multiple existing systems. The second report that the current working group will deliver at the end of this year is focused on improving network resilience through diversity of routes and landings. A lot of routing and landing activity obviously is determined by commercial issues, by engineering issues with seafloor topography, but there's also a lot of influence with state and local governments and their permitting regimes. Outside of Hermosa Beach in California, between the state government and the national marine sanctuaries, it's very challenging to land a system there. And so there's obviously a need for further guidance about what the FCC can do there. And finally, as part of the FCC's outage reporting rulemaking, there's a little bit at the end that contains a second set of proposals to set up a clearinghouse within the FCC to improve submarine cable protection. And this is a great idea. It's something the industry's been pushing for a long time, to create a single point of contact for submarine cable information within the federal government. We think this should have been the principal focus of the rulemaking. It can do the most for protection and streamlining permitting. So we're going to continue to press for that. The CSRIC report that our working group is working on is going to have a lot of influence. We sense the FCC staff is eagerly awaiting it because they want to work with the recommendations that we make to help adopt that into the FCC's rules. So with that, I will finish up. Thanks.
Fascinating. Thank you. It's getting there. 2 more to go. Dean Viverka, come on down.
Too much red wine last night.
Red wine. Too much red wine last night, wasn't it?
Good morning and aloha, everybody.
Aloha.
My name's Dean, and if you can't tell from my accent, I'm from Sydney, Australia. Today I'm going to talk about, well, Paul's strong-armed me into giving another update on operational aspects of the submarine cable networks. Considering I know most of the people in this room, I'm probably not telling you anything new, but so my presentation probably only pertained to those new people here. But anyway, hope you'll learn something. It's going to be in two parts. One will be an operational aspect in my role as Vice President Operations Southern Cross, and the other one as Vice Chairman of the ICPC. I'll be giving an update on that. So only three topics. One of the things to counter, I guess, the updates we've had on all the new systems today was to look at how we do system upgrades of existing systems. And we're going to concentrate a little bit on that, do an update on marine maintenance, ship maintenance, and finish off with the ICPC update. Paul's allowed me to indulge in one Southern Cross slide here, but it's a way of giving background on some of the upgrade stuff that I'm going to talk about. You may have seen in the press releases that we've recently put out, Southern Cross has been doing upgrades now for the whole 15 years that we've been in existence. I think we're up to number 11 or 12. In this last year, we've had another 1.8 terabits of capacity between Australia and the US. We've had a couple of firsts in this upgrades as well. We've now added the first 200 gigabit per channel wavelengths on one of our shorter segments. We've used flexible grid technology to squeeze the most spectrum out of our fibre pair, which has worked fantastically well. In fact, we're now up to 2.5 terabits on one single fibre pair. And when you think of the original design of Southern Cross, which had a total capacity of 16 by 2.5 gigs or 40 gigs on one fibre pair, we're now up into the 100-fold region of the capabilities of upgrades. Along with the capacity upgrades, we also undertook a first in our switch upgrades, our digital cross-connect switches moving from 3.6 terabits to 15 terabits. And overall now we have about a potential capacity of about 15 terabits in today's current technology. This goes hand in hand with our extension of our both commercial and technical extension of our cable for another 5 years beyond design, so we're up to a 2013 life span, which helps reduce the cost of ownership for our customers and gives them security for another 15 years. We're starting to move into different areas of interconnection, so we're now introducing a lot more 100 gig interconnection. Seems to be the normal now for our customers, 100 gig E. Even though OTN is there, it's not being taken up as much. And lastly, we've also, hopefully by the end of this month, we'll have extended into 4 new US POP sites in LA and Silicon Valley. So with that as the background, I just want to cover off sort of a checklist on how we go about, how network operators go about upgrades. Obviously, we start with a defining of the requirements first up, and that can involve both transport. And when we look at transport nowadays, we have to look at the mix of technologies. As I mentioned, we now have a range of wavelengths from 10, 40, 100 and 200 gig wavelengths in our network. And often we have to move those around a bit to maximise not only reusing the capacity that we'd already put in, but then maximising the capacity on each of our segments. Typically hand in hand, we have to upgrade switching capabilities. And moreover, I think the network operators are moving from traditional layer 0, layer 1 providers to more of a layer 2 to 2.5 providers through things like SDN, Ethernet, more carrier Ethernet products, etc. And this is something now that you need to take into consideration as part of the overall upgrade and what you want to provide to your customers. It's not just about the capacity, it's really about the end service in terms of Ethernet nowadays. Most often we'll do a tender and evaluation, but when we do that, it's not just looking at the capital cost of the upgrade. We look at a total cost of ownership, so a whole life cycle proposition, not only the cost of the equipment, but how that operationally pans out over the life of the expected duration of that equipment. You look at the operational aspects, how those fold into existing systems, what's the capability of our staff to be able to manage these things, support costs, sparing, the whole thing goes into the mix when we do a tender evaluation. I guess for the upgrade networks, one of the most difficult things we have to juggle is the fact that we're upgrading live systems. So you could be adding channels to existing fibre pairs that are already carrying traffic, and this is one of the greatest risks we have, to provide a non-interruptible upgrade to our networks. And we spend a fair bit of time planning those types of things. Mostly the upgrades consist of two components, typically a software upgrade, and those in itself can be quite challenging. In the Southern Cross network, we have over 70 nodes that we typically have to upgrade, and planning and executing those can be time-consuming and take a lot of planning to get right, again, to make sure we don't interrupt live traffic. Typically follows hardware upgrades, and nowadays too we have to balance that with our spares holdings. So as we add more equipment, reassess the spares that we're holding. Do we increase those? Do we move one type of card to one segment and try and minimise spares in different countries that we maybe have our cable stations? We also have to integrate all those platforms into our OSS systems. We run 3 separate vendor platforms on Southern Cross. Each of those feed into an OSS system which aggregates not only the alarms and the inventory, but folds in customer information, workforce management, and a whole range of other things. So we need to make sure those northbound interfaces from equipment is compatible and makes the life of the operators easier. Towards the end, staff training is very critical. If you bring on training too early before the new equipment arrives, the staff often forget it and they're too busy looking after their own, what they have in place. But you don't want to leave it too late where they're then expected to operate new equipment at the detriment to our customers. So we try and plan that quite critically as well. Finally, I guess we're now seeing, as I said, we have a lot of 100 gig interface, client interface connections. So we're having to upgrade traditional 10G test equipment or buying new equipment, and this can be a bit of a challenge as well. In terms of the impact on our frontline troops, the network operations centres, these guys have to manage all of this while looking after their existing networks, managing upgrades within maintenance windows, communicating with customers, typically giving them a couple of week window of notice that we're going to be doing stuff. We often have to migrate traffic to optimise the network configuration. And we're finding we're now investing in more different types of training in terms of Ethernet. And as we go along to more SDN type products as well, there'll be an increase in the capabilities of staff, moving up from more traditional transport training they had. All of this comes along with the documentation, dreaded documentation of upgrading process and procedures. I've already talked on the OSS integration, but that complexity increases each time we add a new inventory of equipment cards, etc. And finally, something that you may not think about, but we also then have to clear space in our cable stations for the next upgrades, and so managing the decommissioning of the older equipment throughout this process as well is just as onerous. I want to move on quickly now to the zone maintenance agreement, so an update on marine maintenance. Fairly straightforward, so a lot of people in this room are aware of these, but probably touch on this from the view of new system operators, what they can expect or what's out there for their maintenance, marine maintenance requirements once the submarine cable goes in. There's probably 3 categories of marine maintenance. The first one's the traditional zone maintenance agreement, and this map here shows you the traditional zone maintenance agreements covering virtually the whole world. You'll see that there's no zone agreement within this southern Pacific region from Australia up to Hawaii, but I'll talk about that. So the traditional ones, NAS, ACMA, MECMA, CECOM and Yokohama cover those. The zone agreement is probably the lowest risk and often the lowest cost option. This is where all the cable systems within a region join together, negotiate a contract with a marine maintenance provider. You know the fixed cost of that. We set day rates and we control the activities of the ship predominantly so that we don't let the ships do work outside of their zones. But they may be allowed to do external work on an interruptible and sometimes non-interruptible basis. Some of those costs come back into the members of the zone to offset their costs. The other alternative then is a private maintenance agreement. And here typically a maintenance provider will negotiate with a single system to provide coverage, and again here's a list of the regions covered. And some of these overlap the traditional zone agreements. You'll see now though in the South Pacific there's a specific maintenance agreement that covers all the cables in the South Pacific. And in this case it's a bit of a hybrid. So while each of the cables in this region have a private contract with the maintenance provider, we actually act as almost in a default zone arrangement. So we again control the activities of the ship, and it's sort of a hybrid of both a zone and private maintenance agreement. The third option, of course, is not to have any agreement with a maintenance provider. This is the highest risk, may be the lowest cost because you're not putting any upfront money. However, if you do have a cable fault, you're then at the mercy of the spot market. As I mentioned, if zone ships are around, they're not likely to, well, they won't release a ship for a spot market repair. So you might have to get a ship in from way outside of your area. There's no fixed day rate, so you're again at the mercy of whatever the ship provider wants to charge you at that time. So they're primarily the options on maintenance agreements. A lot of the zone maintenance agreements are coming up for renegotiation at the moment. NAS has just concluded theirs. The South Pacific one is due this year, and there's a couple of the other zones also up for renewal. And typically those agreements last for 5 or more years. Moving on now to the ICPC. Most of you in here, whether you know it or not, your company is probably a member of the ICPC, so the International Cable Protection Committee. Currently we have over 160 members from 64 countries, established back in 1958, principally to look at the physical protection of submarine cables. These days we have moved beyond that and work more closely with governments and others to look at other protection mechanisms, more legal protections. We've opened up the membership to almost everyone in the industry now, so most of the equipment suppliers are members, survey companies are members, and governments have now been allowed to join as members, and we have 5 government members there listed on the bottom. Just to give you a quick update on the activities of the ICPC, and each one of these topics I could probably talk to for about an hour, so I'm only going to give you the 30-second view on each of them. 10 seconds. 10 seconds? We've just, last year we had our 48th plenary in Hong Kong Special Administrative Region. Had over 135 delegates, and probably one of the most successful ICPC plenaries we've had to date. Membership in ICPC allows two delegates from each company to go free of charge. Ticking off in no particular order, the activities conducted from 2015. The Sargasso Sea workshop we attended with the Sargasso Sea Commission at the end of 2014, but the joint 40-page report on that was published at the start of 2015, looking at how the Sargasso Sea Commission is trying to protect the sargassum that floats in the water in the Atlantic, and seeing how the submarine cables may interact with that or cause an issue. And this 40-page report clearly showed that there was very little impact to submarine cables once they're laid in the ocean to this. So that was a very good outcome in terms of the environmental impact of submarine cables. Our international law advisor did a 2-hour presentation to the United Nations Division of Oceans and Law of the Sea in the start of 2015. And these things are very important because we're now targeting United Nations at a high level. And in fact, the Secretary General of the United Nations in his annual speech came out with 3 paragraphs specifically dedicated to submarine cables, outlining the low environmental impact submarine cables have, and was really a big tick for submarine cables. And this will become a bit more important on my next slide. So I'll leave that for the moment. ICPC also conducts a lot of sponsorships, a lot of technical environmental papers we sponsor. And one of the other sponsorships we do is the Rhodes Academy. The Rhodes Academy is a 3-week law-intensive review of the United Nations Convention of Law of the Sea, typically attended by government low-level diplomats and others, but also people from the industry have attended. I see a few alumni in here. Kent's been there, Catherine Crease has been there. And I was fortunate to lecture there 2 years ago on the submarine cable specific subject. ICPC sponsors a writing competition, and last year we had 3 winners of that. And the prize is a scholarship, money towards their scholarship to attend the Rhodes Academy, so it's becoming very popular. OSPAR is the Oslo-Paris Convention that looks at an area of the sea in Europe and part of the top of the North Atlantic. ICPC has just been granted, or was granted, observer status there. And one of the things we're trying to look at correcting is a report, a best environmental practice report that OSPAR put out. Unfortunately, they failed to consult anyone within the industry, so it's a bit lopsided. And we're trying to have them review that with more up-to-date literature, which will aid in their education on it. We also did a workshop for the Council of Security Cooperation of the Asia Pacific, so the ASEAN countries within this region, and that went very well. In fact, the CSCAP Council, in their report back to the ASEAN countries, recommended that all states, all governments therefore, should join the ICPC, as it found us to be a very instrumental organisation in future protection of critical infrastructure, which is what we look after. We've made several press releases through the year, and it was interesting. Kent talked about shark bite and Russian submarines. We actually had to put a press release out on those, particularly for Shark Week, because of the hysteria that comes with that week of videos that hits pay TV. And we also commented on the Russian subs and a few other security aspects as well. Turning now to some of the more longer-term relationships we have several MOUs with organisations. The International Seabed Authority is a UN agency that looks after all deep seabed minings in the high seas. And the MOU here looks to make sure that both the ISA are aware of submarine cables within the lease areas that they're going to issue, and also that submarine cable operators are able to pass on their information to the ISA. So those things are taken into consideration during the early phases of issuing licences. These mining licences are going to be a long-term thing. They take about 10 years of exploration before they do any extraction, so they're sort of a 10 to 20-year thing. So we have some time, but we've started early with the ISA. Similarly with the International Hydrographic Office, we've just signed an MOU, and Graham Evans from EGS led the charge on that. And we're looking to standardise charting for all the global hydrographic offices, and also look at standardising the digital route position listing formats, again to ensure that submarine cables are appropriately recorded. The International Maritime Organisation is another one that we're about to aid. The maintenance ships have come under some threats of interference from fishing vessels when they're doing repairs, particularly in areas of high fishing activity, South China Seas, etc. And those vessels are ignoring existing regulations to keep away from vessels that have limited manoeuvrability, which a cable ship obviously has. So the Marshall Islands will be putting forward a proposal to re-establish a 1 nautical mile separation from cable ships and a 1/4 nautical mile separation from repair buoys. In fact, a couple of repair buoys keep getting picked up by fishermen as they think they're valuable. So anyone that has contact with their IMO officers in your countries, a call has gone out to ICPC members to update them on this and to gain every country's support in the Marshall Islands recommendation on this. Just touching back on the UN, there's been development they want to develop a legally binding instrument under UNCLOS for the conservation and sustainable use of marine biological diversity in areas beyond natural jurisdiction. So these are the areas on the high seas. Again, this could have a great impact on submarine cables, which have in the past been allowed the freedom of laying and maintaining cables in the high seas. And we have to get ahead of this one in terms of the environmental requirements that may be imposed on submarine cables in the high seas areas. Again, anything under UNCLOS, changes to these things are going to be a long-term thing, could take anywhere from 5 to 10 years, but we've started that educational process and hope to get in front of that. Probably the most interesting workshop we just concluded at the end of last year, November, was at the invitation of the Indonesian government. With their new government, they've set up a new ministry, the Coordinating Ministry of Maritime Affairs. We were invited to present to them, and Indonesia have recognised that they have some issues in trying to attract investment in international telecommunications. I can't say too much about this, but it was a very successful workshop. The Indonesian government were expecting to make some announcements on things they've now worked out in terms of being able to improve permitting and single points of contact, government lead agencies, as Kent mentioned, etc. So it'll be a watch this space. But ICPC sent a delegation of about 7 or 8 people. We had 3 of the cable ship operators there, Alcatel Global Marine, TE Subcom, sorry? Hurry up. Okay, sorry. And watch this space. I've been given the hurry up. I just want to close on a couple of quick graphs. Some of the tools that we're using to educate governments are things like this. So where we're looking, we now are able to collect data on faults from every single zone maintenance agreement and private agreement. So we now have 100% coverage on fault information. In the past, we used to look at what was the cause of submarine cable breaks, but that hasn't changed over time. It's always been fishing cables and seismic activities like earthquakes. What these new tools allow us to do is to look at, well, once a cable is broken, how quickly is it, which is very important, how quickly can we repair that fault through either permitting or whatever. These charts here show which countries have the longest delay. Skipping through very quickly, we break that down into, is it a permit delay, is it a prior repair delay, etc. So we can really pinpoint per country within the territorial seas and EEZs of a cable where the spots are. We have a whole bunch of other tools that I won't show, but just looking at this traffic light map, therefore we can easily identify the red, green and yellow spots. So red spots obviously are long delay regions for cable repairs. Greens are good, and the yellow ones are areas of requiring improvement. And we do actually track those improvement metrics. So in the past year, looking at the 2014 data, even though Southeast Asia was red and still is red in terms of the length of time taking to do repairs, we have seen an improvement shown by the green in that region in the last year, and similarly other areas. So therefore, some of the areas that are still in red are areas that require further attention from us. I'll just finish on that. The ICPC is ably supported, and we have MOUs with some of these organisations as well, but we do have regional cable protection committees, if you like. In this part of the world, we have the Oceania, OSCA, Submarine Cable Association, as well as NASCA, looking at the Northern Pacific, and each look at regional activities. As Kent mentioned, NASCA focuses heavily on US and FCC type issues, but each other region has their own issues as well. And thank you.
Well, I hope you don't mind. I'm going to ask for your indulgence to have another 10 minutes. It's going to make you late for coffee. Are you happy or you're unhappy? Doesn't matter.
The doors are locked. Well, good morning. I'm here to share with you some progress. I label this Think Smart, and SMART is science, monitoring, and reliable telecommunication. We've accomplished a lot this year. This is sponsored by the ITU. So where are we going is going to be explained here. I'm John Mariano from the David Ross Group, and in terms of where I'm from, I'll just state our state motto. I'm from New Jersey. You got a problem with that? But I'm pumped. So, mission statement. Achieve a cooperative endeavor between the science community and the commercial telecommunication industry to implement a global subsea environmental sensors. Now, there are sensor systems out there, but the problem is massive. Why? We need ground truth on global changes. And depending on your political position, you may or may not think there's global warming, things like that. We in the U.S. run into that all the time. Why subsea sensors? Well, these are universally applied. We've seen all the maps. They're all over the globe. Why is it difficult for this to be accepted? It's going to add cost to systems. We're all worried about implementing new systems and how to apply that, how to apply these technologies. And that's basically where we are in the program. We need to find a way to have industry and owners accept the notion here on putting sensor systems on commercial systems. And of course, there's skepticism, concern about reliability, but we all know that sensor systems have been out in the oceans for many years. Masuda-san's company has been doing this for, I don't know, 30 or 40 years, and I think some of those 30-year ones are still working. So it's not like we have to invent something new here. The technology is here, but it has to be accepted, and this is the industry that we're looking to from the Joint Task Force of the ITU. So, what progress have we made? U.S. legislation has been passed, NASA endorsement, and we are now heading towards, with your help, hopefully, to a demonstrator, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So when we think of SMART, this is applying some sort of sensors, temperature sensors, pressure sensors, et cetera, onto commercial systems. And what can we achieve with that? I think that the chart is readable, but certainly climate changes comes to mind first. And we've seen and are concerned about the sea level that is kind of creeping up on many places in the world. We can address seasonal variation and be better prepared. And then instantaneous tidal data can be achieved. And maybe where we're going to get the biggest bang for the buck is with respect to instantaneous tsunami warning systems. And we know how disastrous that could be, but we are in a position together to achieve an early warning system. NASA had a workshop this year, and the endorsement for SMART was strong. The SMART pressure measurements serve as a ground truth. So the satellites are up there, and they're saying, you know, we're telling you how things are, but they're asking now that we provide really what ground truth is to their sensor systems. Some of the recommendations: smart cable concept. The smart cable concept deserves broad support. We should prioritize which cable routes are most significant, so it doesn't have to be everywhere. But when we think of what we're trying to accomplish, whether it's a tsunami warning system or pure thermal analysis over a long period of time, it doesn't have to be everywhere. And then just improve the data gathering system. And surprisingly enough, even Congress was able to achieve something this year, and it was in support of this probably little-known SMART program. So there's hope for the U.S. Government to be behind here in recognizing the value of a warning system in education and research. And they even made, you know, specific Section 4, Paragraph 9, to encourage that environmental observing technology should be applied to commercial and federal undersea communication systems, and that modification of the tsunami hazardous mitigation program should, in fact, roll in these smart cables. A little bit more on that. To achieve a cost-effective solution to mitigate impacts of tsunami, including improvements of near-field and distant tsunami detection systems. The message here that I'd like to convey is that we really need this industry's support. The owners, the suppliers, governments, developers, on trying to move this forward. The present state of monitoring, where the red dots are existing and the blue dots are planned, might look like good coverage, but they're just spot data points. They're not a continuum of monitoring, and that's really what is needed here. And of course, the planned ones, who knows how long before those go in. So what is the demonstrator that we would like to implement for SMART? And it's kind of pictorially here. We can envision sensors right on a repeater, within a repeater. Of course, one needs to know what's happening internally in terms of thermal properties of a repeater, so maybe that's a little more difficult. Underneath that is put it in the tails of a system. Then another one is nodes along the cable with transmission system to a repeater. And then, of course, a branch system. And when we look at a branch system, we know that the branches are out there. So we're not saying we need to really move technology forward. The technology is here. Sensor systems have been put in for years on, and what we need is the commercial world to better support this. And what we're asking today is to, for those of you that will be at SubOptic, we would like to gather suppliers, owners of potential owners, potential owners, yeah, academia, operators, and governments to participate in the workshop we have planned the day before SubOptic and the morning of the 18th. The agenda is basically to review JTF's plans, Joint Task Force plans for the demonstrator, to kind of flesh out how best we can move things forward with the demonstrator, target some supporters, what are the funding opportunities. This is certainly very basic, and to get enough money to move this forward, and recap legislation and permitting. So the Subsea Workshop will be a key event in planning the demonstrator event. We need your support, and I'd like to have Rhett stand up. Rhett is going to come around to the table and get your business cards. What we need to do is we need to understand who might be coming and supporting this. So please see Rhett and provide a business card so we get a good handle on what's going to happen at SubOptic. Thank you.
You did it. Okay, round the world in 50 minutes, and then we did the rest. SubOptic's up there, everybody. It's a wonderful opportunity again to attend this unique event. I'm not going to stand in the way of your cup of coffee and stuff. Thank you so much. Thank the panel. I do. And please, don't go away. Have a cup of coffee, relax for a few minutes. We've got Elaine and part 2 coming up at 11 a.m. And you don't have to go to lunch today. It's going to be on the table, so just settle in.
Did you? I'm one of the founders. We tried. We paid it all back. I hope it was substantial. Thank you.
Much appreciated.
That's the right money.
Thanks very much.
When we first did it. Sorry. And so, I got a small percentage. But, I have no money at risk. No, I think we've now paid back all the investment. All the equity's been paid back. I think we're maybe short like 2%. Yeah,
yes, but I don't.
Well, I'm not sure where the original equity pumped in about 375. Okay, well, I get a different. You get a part of it. Yeah, this is good. The founders of the founder. Yeah. So anyway, it's nice. Twice a year, it kind of shows up. Yeah. Nice. Well, I think you're not going to see one for a little while. We kind of paid that one, and then we said, look, we need to fund the business for growth. Yeah. So, but I would say something not a bad investment. Keep after it. See what happens. No, see, we put the money in, makes no money, they pay back all the interest. Now there's no money in it. Yeah, exactly. So you just get the cash. Exactly. That's the other shareholders as well. Yeah. I'm happy to hear that. Good. I wish I had some money in it, but there you go. I'm trying to convince them of